Better late than never. Golden Black Live Friday afternoon. If it wasn't for technology, we'd have no technology at all, so to speak. Tom Dienhart, Brian Neubert joined me for segment one. Want to thank our sponsors, and of course, that's Triple X, on the hill but on the level, the Purdue tradition since 1929, and they're making it work as best they can during this pandemic. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HDI tonight. The State Farm agent, Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. And we have a good show today, really good show. We have Kyle Neddenreed from the Indianapolis Star. We'll talk with Brian and myself about Caleb First and Trey Kaufman and high school basketball in the state of Indiana, a little football as well. And Josh Helmholt will join me in segment 3 as we'll break down Purdue's recruiting class. Josh gives his perspective on Jeff Brom's most recent signees of this past Wednesday. And Brian, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, we had a busy week here, obviously, with the Purdue men's basketball winning on Wednesday, football signing a class of 14. Hard to minimize the fact that Yanni Karloftis was needed and Purdue got him, but it is a small class, not a high-ranked class. We haven't really heard from the coach, but tell me what you think in terms of just your offshoot of what went down on Wednesday and where this class can help Purdue down the road.
Well, I think the most important point to make right off the bat is that it's an incomplete class to this point. Yep. It's going to be similar to last year, the year before that, and probably every year to come. In that they're going to augment it with transfers from here on out, and that's going to become more of an immediate need addressing type of situation. And I think that's going to kind of be the new normal in football recruiting, as if it wasn't that way already with the graduate transfer wire having become what it's become. But now that transfers are going to be pretty freewheeling from here on out, I think football recruiting is becoming much more of a year-to-year deal than it is a 4 or 5 year projection kind of thing. And I think Purdue is going to be kind of one of the faces of that this year. They're going to have to go out and sign a bunch of transfers to help them right away to kind of get things straightened out here. That'll tell the tale of how this class turns out. Just like I thought last year was going to come down to the JUCOs and come down to the graduate transfers in terms of what that class could do. This year, I think in terms of freshmen, I don't know if you have necessarily the high-end impact type of guys. Yanni Karloftis would be the best one, probably because of opportunity and because of the fact that Purdue is completely committed to making him a starter or at least a prominent player right away. I think he's a good enough player to be able to contribute right away. Whether he can, be that sort of transformational type of freshman right away, I don't know. Other than that, this is kind of a little bit of a standard Purdue class in terms of there's a lot of, maybe more so under the radar types of developmental guys as opposed to sort of that high end kind of talent that Purdue under Jeff Brom has done a pretty good job getting every year.
Yeah, and that's an important thing. Obviously, 4 offensive linemen too, which is big part of this as well. The big guys that can augment always a work in progress to build that lineup at Purdue. Tom, some roster moves too. It hasn't been a dull week in terms of that. Bob Diaco will no longer be Purdue's defensive coordinator. You found out not long ago that Greg Brown, Purdue's secondary coach, will no longer be on the staff as well. Do you expect more moves on the defensive side? What do you make of all this at this point?
Who knows, Alan? Just stay tuned, right? This almost has become a off-season ritual for Purdue of late. Last year they brought in Terrence Jamison, the new defensive line coach, brought in Marty Biaggi, special teams coach, and, of course, Bob Diaco as well. And this year, like you said, we've already seen 2 changes, Alan. So I don't know. I guess I'll be surprised if there's more, but like I said, stay tuned. Expect the unexpected. 2021 shapes up as a very interesting year 5 for Jeff Brom and West Lafayette to see the trajectory of this program, guys. 3 losing seasons in a row, 4 losses in succession to end 2020. Things, I think it's fair to say, didn't go as many people anticipated this year for a lot of different reasons. So, yeah, the coaching shuffle continues, guys, and you can only change assistant coaches so many times and so often here. You need some continuity. So, again, that's going to be interesting to see how this develops and moves forward. And in particular, guys, who Brom picks to be that DC.
Yeah, Brian, you look at roster moves, you look at the situation and make that for what it is. You know, you're trying to find the right formula. If you're Jeff Brom, you've got to improve on the defensive side of the ball. But this is also a time that, you know, next year will be year 5 that you begin to, you know, you want to develop that stability, but you also have to kind of develop who you are on the defensive side of the ball. Purdue has struggled to do that.
Yeah, I think this season was, you know, profoundly disappointing for Purdue. I think it's important we mention the fact that everybody's playing college football during a pandemic right now.
Right, that's
The
true.
offseason was completely messed up. That's everybody's problem, but I think it affected some teams more than others. There's no telling how much that affected Purdue this year, but you know, that bears mentioning, the circumstances in which Purdue had a disappointing season, just like the circumstances in which Northwestern had a great season. Probably not a coincidence they had the least COVID in the Big Ten and they had a great year. Just wanted to mention that. But from a competitive perspective, you know, the results do still matter. And this was a big year for Purdue in terms of the trajectory of its program. Bouncing back from the worst season under Jeff Brom to date last year. Obviously, a lot went into that, including injuries. But this was an important year to prove that you're still moving in the right direction. And it really couldn't have gone a whole lot worse after those first 2 wins of the season. Purdue lost a close game at Minnesota after losing a disappointing game against Northwestern. That was a really big game at the time. Just didn't feel like they ever recovered from, you know, a loss or 2 there. Clearly, there were issues behind the scenes here. I mean, as quickly as Bob Diaco was kicked to the curb here, that was a no-brainer, obviously, because Purdue moved so quickly on that. We've all heard, you know, stuff from behind the scenes about there being problems, perhaps in the locker room, problems between the coaching staffs and the players. Jeff Brom, before the Nebraska week, I thought talked like he was speaking directly to his team in terms of some of the things he was talking about selfishness and listening to your coaches and, you know, just playing hard, things like that. Clearly something was amiss with this team, and it is Jeff Brom's job now to be the face of the solution, to figure this out, to make important hires based off what he wants and not what is sold to him by the people interviewing for jobs. He's got to set the mandate for what he wants in this program. He has to fill it, and he has to get everybody to live up to it.
You know, Tom, Jeff Brom's teams in years 1 and 2 were you never knew exactly what you were going to see. Certainly in year 1, defensively, tremendous effort on that side of the ball, making plays. Is it as simple of, and Brian's point about the pandemic is absolutely, you know, real, that this is a tough time to kind of reload, but you got to find that to get back, I guess, to what you really had, maybe up to the Ohio State game in 2018 in terms of just that little bit of edge, whether it was a toughness, whatever it was. It seems that's what's missing that needs to somehow be recovered. And that will be a big challenge for Jeff Brom and company to get that figured out.
Yeah, I think the record since that Ohio State game 2018 is 8-16 for Purdue. And it's funny you bring up that edge that's been missing. If you guys listen to Mike Bobinski on the radio show Thursday night, he talked about that very thing, guys. Brom's, ability, the need to find that edge that made them so competitive and successful, especially in year 1. It's one of those nebulous, intangible things. How do you define it? How do you get it back? I'm not sure. It always starts with leadership. Every organization starts at the top, and it all trickles down from there. So it has to start from the top with Jeff Brom. They have to get that competitive edge back. And Alan, you talked about excitement too. Boy, 2017 reminded me of some of 1997, Joe Tiller's first year. Expect the unexpected. A lot of wins I didn't anticipate, not to the degree Tiller had in 97, but still a lot of fun. Gave everybody a lot of hope. 2018, was successful to a degree, but it's sort of trickled backwards since then, guys. And it's a slippery slope, man. These things get away from you quickly. And like I said off at the top here, this shapes up as, maybe the seminal moment of the Jeff Brom era here. How he responds to this in this offseason with these hires, how the team moves forward on the field collectively in 2021. I mean, this is it. This is going to be the point in time where I think his Purdue tenure is defined.
I have a point to make here that I was going to say for a column at some point, but I think it bears mentioning. And I'm not necessarily saying this is Purdue's problem per se, but I will say that when Purdue had that little shot of energy under Jeff Brom when he first took the job, it was guys who got their brains beat in for years, who were just tired of it, who really led that charge. And those were Darrell Hazel's players. And they played well for Jeff Brom because they were tired of Darrell Hazel era losing. When you upgrade recruiting the way they have upgraded recruiting at Purdue, you are doing so with opportunity as much as anything. And when you are selling opportunity, you are telling a player you are really good and you're going to walk right in here and play for us. This happened to Joe Tiller too, but what you do is you make a lot of promises, or a lot of things you say are construed as promises. Guys come in thinking that things are going to be guaranteed to them. And when you're doing this, you are naturally appealing to one's selfish side. You are making it all about them. And sometimes at a place like Purdue, that's what you have to do to be able to get somebody over Ohio State or Michigan, is you have to promise them a role immediately. But what you do then is this is why Matt Painter has the whole world figured out. He's got the world by the tail right now in recruiting. Is he doesn't make promises that are going to erode his culture once all those players get to campus. I'm just saying that's something that happens sometimes. It did happen to Joe Tiller and his staff too. They were recruiting at a very high level for a very long time. And when you look at the way that all played out, they were better earlier on, by and large, than they were later when they had considerably more talented players. I'm just mentioning that as a dynamic sometimes that happens to programs that have been through what, Purdue's program has been through the last few years.
An interesting point, and I think it's a valid one that's difficult to know absolutely empirically whether we can prove any of that, but it certainly is. There's definitely needs to be, based on what we saw this year, some changes and some effective ones if Purdue is going to get back. And you look at next year, and again, it's early to do that. But you have Oregon State, not a great team, but certainly a decent team, and Notre Dame in your non-conference schedule. It's going to be a challenge. You're going to have to swim upstream if you're Jeff Brom to get this back to where you want it to be. But Tom, Mike, you mentioned Mike Babinski, and obviously you listened to the show last night and have put some stories on the site today about that. Make no mistake, Mike Babinski was concerned about the way the season turned out, but he was also pretty emphatic about his support for where Jeff Brom and where he thinks he can get this program. Any other highlights that you that captured your attention based on what you heard last night?
Yeah, interesting. They've sounds like they've done a pretty good job with the COVID situation. It says they've only really had one serious issue during this whole time of managing COVID-19 among their staffers and student athletes. NCAA tournament, the fact they've already had people on campus to, I guess, look at the venue, maybe becoming a site for some NCAA basketball tournament games. I know that had been speculated before. I didn't know how serious that was. So that was interesting. Talked about playing basketball on Christmas Day, how that was really the impetus of the players, he said, across the Big Ten, wanting to stay on campus, not wanting to go home. If they were going to be on campus, hey, why not play a basketball game? So that'd be interesting to play Maryland at 2:30 Eastern time that day as well. So those were interesting revelations. And then guys, just, managing the financial, I guess we'll call it a catastrophe if we want, of what COVID-19 has wrought to these athletic departments. Mike was asked by Tim Newton, maybe what percentage of the media money did Mike think that Purdue was still going to garner from the Big Ten? He thought it would be in the 70 to 80% range. Still sounds like a pretty good figure, pretty substantial figure, but as Mike Babinski pointed out, still going to leave them millions of dollars in the hole. But the one positive, guys, I'll leave you with this is, he talked about the two fundraising initiatives, the 1869 Society, and of course the More Than a Game fund as well. And it sounds like all is going well there. Mike seemed like he's very pleased with the progress they made from a fundraising standpoint. So there's hope. And again, guys, he wants to try to contain this financial situation just to 2020-21 if they can. That's the real ultimate goal, guys. Get through this year, try to get your money caught up so you can start with a fresh, normal palette in the fall of 2021.
Brian, and last question of this segment, and we're, Mike Babinski, athletic directors at this level, they kind of got something they didn't sign up for this year. Who would have ever thought that you would have to deal with the deficits? But Mike really does project a sense of calm in this environment. And Brian, we've been around him, and Tom has as well. Whether he also is honest about it. He's called it. He's been very, very honest about the term he uses, which a four-letter word with the last four letters show. He's called that many times as well. But that does count for something in this time that Mike to get his staff and his football program and basketball program through this.
Yeah, I kind of appreciate Mike's honesty, because when you listen to that show last night, how often he talks about things being chaos.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about COVID stuff. I'm talking about like the transfer reform and everything. But it's always been kind of his MO to be realistic about things, to be honest about things, but also project that calm, like you mentioned before, to try to set a positive tone for everything, no matter what's going on. I think that's applying right now to football, because obviously, things didn't go well this season. He voiced his unwavering support for his coach. That's what he has to do. That's what athletic directors have to do. It's their job to support their coaches. So much is invested in these coaches at this level nowadays. They are too big to fail. And the AD's job is to make sure that, things are in the best position possible to succeed. So he has to project that confidence in the football program. But that's been kind of what he's done too with the whole COVID thing, has been, hey, this is not our new normal. He always talks about that, is that this is not permanent. This is only temporary. We hope to make this a one-time deal. We just have to get creative. We have to make the best of this. Nobody wants to do this. There's no right way to do it. But we are going to get through this. And I think that's, anytime the top of your organization is projecting that sort of message, and not visibly freaking out, I think is an important tone to set.
Yeah, and I think he does a good job with that. Well, stay tuned for Brian's coverage. Purdue Notre Dame tomorrow will be a very interesting basketball game. 2:30. He'll have a preview. We'll be on the site. A lot to look forward to there. We also will continue. We will not have a show in the next couple of weeks because Christmas and New Year's Day fall on a Friday, but we'll be back on January 8th. But stay tuned, too. We'll be talking a lot of basketball in our Sunday conversation on the site. So, or a weekend conversation, whatever we name it, we'll be talking about that after Purdue Notre Dame, and we'll post that sometime on Sunday. So, all right, we'll move on to segment 2. Brian will stay put and join myself and Kyle Neddenreep, and really look forward to that as the Indianapolis Star basketball, football preps guy. He's as good as it gets, and some really good conversation forthcoming. And of course, it'll be Josh Helmholt in segment 3, and we'll break down Purdue's recruiting class. All right, guys, thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
Dive into the new Badiah, only at the XXX Family